Hello, wonderful leader. This is Taaka. Welcome to the Leadership in Africa Redefined, the podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Busara Africa, a Pan-African leadership development firm. In every episode of this podcast, we uncover powerful insights, share real-world experiences, and deliver practical strategies to help you excel as a leader. Subscribe to the show to become the leader you have always wanted to be. Enjoy! Welcome to another episode of Leadership in Africa Redefined, the podcast. And I'm so excited today because we have a very special guest with us. We have none other than Dr. Thelma Awori, renowned feminist and development expert and former Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations. Dr. Awori has been dedicated to women's empowerment and leadership. She was born in Liberia, but is a citizen of Uganda, and her remarkable career spans over 4 decades with expertise in development, policy analysis, program development, advocacy, and development financing, and so much more. Throughout her career, Dr. Awori has worked tirelessly to raise political consciousness and challenge patriarchal systems, which she will tell you more about. And her commitment to social justice and feminism has inspired countless other women, particularly in rural areas, to take action and demand their rights. She founded the Sustainable Market Women's Fund, formerly the Sirleaf Market Women's Fund, which has empowered over 13,000 market women in Liberia. And her work with market women has expanded to Uganda through the Institute for Social Transformation, which she founded with colleagues of hers. So her influence has earned her prestigious honors, including the Women's E-News Leadership Awards in 2016, Enriching Women's Economics, American Institute 2012 Distinguished Alumni Award, and Honorary Consul General of the Republic of Liberia to Uganda. So Dr. Awori has been cited as one of Africa's exemplary leaders, which is why we thought she would be a perfect guest to challenge that narrative that Africa has no good leaders. But in addition to being one of those role model leaders in Africa, Dr. Awori is also my mother. Yay! So today we'll be talking about a number of things. We'll be talking about her leadership journey and, what has enabled her to become one of those leaders that again challenges the narrative that we don't have good leaders in Africa. That's one. The second thing we'll be talking about is one of her many passions and one of the areas she has exercised leadership, which is around women's leadership and role in agriculture. That's the second thing. And the third, which I know you'll all be interested in hearing, is the whole mother-daughter thing. And really how, in many ways, she has inspired me in terms of how I think about leadership, how I show up in leadership, and really provided a live example of the leadership we need on this continent today. So Dr. Awori, aka Mami, Dr. Awori, you're welcome. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. Good morning, Taaka.
Good morning.
Or good afternoon.
Good afternoon, wherever you're listening. If you're watching us, it'd be lovely to see us too in action. I'm normally in Accra, but I took advantage of the fact that I'm home in Uganda to do this. So if you're listening to us, also catch the video recording on YouTube. Otherwise, enjoy the listening. So as we normally do, I think a good place to start, Dr. Awori, is really tell us a little bit about your leadership journey and how that has informed the way you show up as a leader.
That's a good question. My leadership journey has really come from my interest in working with people, and especially disadvantaged people. So I started as an adult educator, trying to see how to get people who had not had the opportunity to go through school to get into university. But in terms of leadership in the women's movement, I guess I just have been there. And one thing about being a leader is to be present, be there. And I have worked with women who form the base of that pyramid that we have in society. And it's been just very interesting there. That's where I have positioned myself. And in that group, you will find market women, you will find women farmers, you will find women who are giving care, you find women doing many things, many things. But I felt I couldn't spread myself everywhere, so I have positioned myself where food is important. And there, after I left the UN, friends of mine came to me and said, "Oh, Thelma, you're leaving the UN, come and join us and see what we are doing in the women's movement." Well, I had always been associated with the women's movement, and I worked for UNIFEM as the director for Africa, then deputy director. And when I went to UNDP, it was also important that women should feel my leadership while I was there. So I decided to join them. That friend was Madame Binta Diop. I became a member of a board in FAS, and we formed something called the GMAC, which is such an interesting organization. It's a confab. I call it a confab because it's not an organization. It's a meeting of 55 of the largest women's networks, not organizations, but networks. That's where you have the FAWES, the Femnets, the Women's Peace Initiatives, and those kinds of networks of women. And we meet twice a year, just before the AU meets, because we discuss the agenda of the AU. If it's about education, if it's about agriculture, if it's about anything else, we discuss that agenda. And we give our inputs on those issues to the AU so that heads of states can make policy recommendations on those issues. Now, when we started, most of the people who came to those meetings were really the head of this organization or the head of that organization. And I said, but this is really not on. We are here talking on behalf of. And those people on whose behalf we are speaking should be here to speak themselves. And who are those? Those are the rural women, the women who give care, all those women. And my colleague said to me, if you can find them, bring them. So I said, of course I'll find them. So I started calling all these organizations that say they work with women, farmers and women at the grassroots, and asked them to bring some of their women to the GMAC. Fortunately, a few of them did. Oxfam, Action Aid, Send a Cow sent us a woman who made a very impactful suggestion when she was there. And that was a suggestion to retire the hoe to the museum. Because the hoe, she said, if you people are depending on us for food security, you can forget it. Because we can't give Africa food security using the hand hoe.
Powerful.
You have to give us another instrument. And a woman leader at that time who was a commissioner of the AU, and we had fought to get her to be the commissioner of the AU, the head of the AU commission, said, that's it. And she put that recommendation in Agenda 2063. You can imagine, a rural woman from Uganda made that suggestion. And at the next meeting of the heads of states, Madam Zuma, who was then the head of the AU Commission, brought a tiller and put it on the stage.
Oh, wow.
And she gave the hoe to President Mugabe, and she says, who was at that time the chair, and said, African women said they don't want this anymore. You give them that. I have 54 of these for each one of you. Make sure your women have, and put this hand hoe into a museum. We don't want to throw it away because it has served us for thousands of years. So we started then an initiative called Empowering Women in Agriculture. And 9 African heads of states joined that initiative. And they said, well, Thelma, you have to run this. So I am the one responsible for that initiative in a GMAC. And through that initiative and through the partners who work with us on that initiative, we bring women farmers to the AU. And it has been a real revolution for them to come to the AU and to speak and to say what they want. We always have a panel where it's the women farmers speaking. They sing, they energize our meetings with their songs, and it's just, I mean, it just changes the whole thing.
Oh, wow.
when you have the voices of these different women. And so that's how my leadership has been going. But at the same time, we were working to, we were not really working for that, but an African woman decided she wanted to be president. And you know, in Africa, we've never had a woman president before.
Yes.
And when we were campaigning for her, some of the women said, you know, there's so many market women. Let's go and see if the market women will vote for her. Let's go and encourage them to vote for her.
Yes.
So they went and talked to the market women. At first, the market women were a little bit hesitant, and they said, but you know, her opponent is our son, and you know, this woman is so educated, she's so high above us, so we're not close to her. But she promised them one thing. She says, if I win, you will win. I will make sure you win. So they came out, voted for her, and as market women, they made that huge structural change in Africa to vote and install the first female president in Africa.
Wow.
Yes, that is what market women did. And after that, she said, well, we said to them that they would, they would win. So we started a fund to support them and help them.
This is in Liberia.
Yes, in Liberia. Yes. And now, after we saw the success of that work, and also if you move all over Africa, look at the markets. Look at how our food is managed. Sometimes on the ground, you know, we pass around these things all the time, but we don't see them. We don't see them consciously.
Yes. But before, you're about to get into a very interesting area now around the food. But before, I want to pause for a second to just, because you said so many rich things about your journey that I almost want to cultivate, to take some of those lessons from it. And then we're going to come to this thing about the food and market women, because that's a bulk of what we'll talk about. But just as you described your leadership journey, I noticed one of the first things you said was, you exercise leadership wherever you are because your focus was on the disadvantaged. So I'm seeing something about your leadership ethos is around the disadvantaged.
Yes.
You focused on women, but the second thing I'm taking from what you discussed is recognizing the diversity of women. And recognizing that too often when we think about women, we think about them so homogeneously. There's, but you started to, market women in agriculture, the caregivers, all the diversity. So that's the second thing, recognizing that. Particularly for those of us working in the space when we talk about intersectionality, recognizing that not all women are the same.
Right.
And therefore will need different things.
Yes.
The third thing I notice is, I hope our listeners and those watching us will notice how she talked about doing the work with Madame Diop after she retired formally from the UN. So again, to me, this is a key thing about leadership. How often we think about leadership as something we use, or leadership as something that's associated when you have a formal position. Whereas just from your journey, I'm hearing you talk about exercise of leadership even after you left these formal roles in the UN. And for many people, retirement is the end of their relevance. And I think that's one of the things that's really inspired me about you, is that how much you've continued to do after formal retirement. You see, there were a lot of things. Another thing I picked up, fourth thing, a lot of things just from what you said, is I noticed that at GMAC, you all made a conscious effort not to speak on behalf of.
Yes.
And I think, to me, I'm seeing that as another key leadership ethos.
Yes.
That too often as leaders, we occupy space. We articulate positions for others, not really giving space for people to have their own voice. So that's another key lesson about your leadership approach and style. Fifth thing, you see, I picked up a lot. Fifth thing is, it's interesting from how you did it at GMAC, from what a wonderful story of this hour, the Ugandan rural woman who talked about the hoe,
Yes.
but how it was also then the AU woman in leadership who then said, let's pick that up.
Yes.
So I'm getting from that also, again, how women leaders working in different spaces, one who's in a rural area, one who's in a formal space in a regional institution, working together, then say, this is how we move the agenda. So the activism, just the powerful stories you've shared, just the way GMAC is operating, showing me that women's leadership is exercised collectively when women from different spaces, those in formal institutions, those working in different spaces, maybe rural areas, come together. And you gave the example of then they elected our first woman, African woman president at that time, which was Her Excellency Ellen Sirleaf Johnson. So much we got already from that.
Wow.
Can you imagine?
I think I'm done.
No, we're coming. That was just the first part, your leadership journey. Now you had started to come to the other juicy conversation we're going to have.
Okay.
And I know our audience will know that the title of this particular episode is Where Does Your Food Come From? Women's leadership in agriculture. And so now I'd paused you, but please now rewind. You're coming to tell us this thing about we need to pay attention as we're going through our markets. What are we seeing? So please continue now about the markets. And maybe as you're talking about the markets where our food comes from, link it to why it's so important to talk about women's leadership in agriculture and the whole food chain. Because many of us, we look at our food, we're more concerned about what's the quality of our food, are people using pesticides, how healthy is it all GMOs? So tell us about how that connects with women's leadership in agriculture.
Well, as you've said, food is central to all of us.
Yes.
You like to eat?
Yes, I do.
And you want to eat 3 times a day
Yes,
sometimes.
you know me well.
There are some people who can only eat once a day.
Yeah.
But everybody has to eat.
Yes.
It's not about liking to eat.
Yes.
You have to eat. And what's very interesting about Africa, unlike other parts of the world, some other parts of the world, women are the key players in the production and management and preparation of food. The food chain is their work. They control that. And they're the main actors in this food system. So it's so important that they're part of the setting in terms of food, the decisions that people make about food and food production and distribution. That's why this topic is very important. But you know that, at first, the statistics showed that women produce 80% of the food. Now is 70% of the food that we have is produced by women. So we have to look at their position in this whole area of food production.
Yes.
The other thing we must look at is the condition. You see, it's the position and the condition. What is the condition of this work that they do? Whether it's in, producing food, whether it's in distribution and marketing, what's the condition, So, women farmers, when we say grace, many people like to say grace when they eat.
Yes.
And sometimes some people add a little sentence that says, and bless the hands that have prepared it.
Yes, yes.
Well, they forget that food didn't fall from heaven like, like manna.
Yes.
It came from somewhere, from some women digging with the hand hoe, experiencing a lot of challenges, pests and other things, And then it goes to the market where this woman is sitting, maybe outside her house or somewhere in a rather unsanitary place, trying to distribute the food. So it's so important to pay attention to this if we want food security in Africa. And that's why that woman who came from Uganda said, you can't depend on us for food security. You have to look at what's happening with us.
As a leader, making decisions and solving problems can sometimes feel overwhelming. Having a thinking partner to help you reflect, gain clarity, and take charge of your situation is essential for personal and professional growth. This is where coaching comes in. At Busara Africa, we offer executive coaching guided by the ethics of the International Coaching Federation. Our internationally certified coaches bring years of experience and mastery of the coaching process, empowering you to take control of your leadership journey. Contact us today at www.busara-africa.com.
Are you doing too much? Feeling overwhelmed, yet still questioning if you're doing enough? Leading from within, the inner work of leadership is here to help. This monthly online program helps leaders like you build self-awareness, master emotional intelligence, and lead with confidence. With expert-led masterclasses, practical tools, and a curated resource library, you'll gain insights to lead with authenticity and impact on your schedule. So take a breath and join me on a powerful journey of inner work required to thrive and find your joy as a leader. Join now on www.busara-africa.com. Yes. Explain a bit for those who are not in the sector. When you talk about food security, how would you define, how would you explain what food security means?
Well, that means the capacity to feed ourselves.
Yes.
At all times.
Yes.
And not depending on food coming from outside.
It's imports.
From imported foods.
Yes.
You see?
Yes.
And the quality of the food.
Yes.
Because if the food is not good quality, then we're getting sick.
And we are hearing about this. I know many of you, depending on what country you're sitting in, you'll start hearing instances of imported tomato paste, imported all of this processed food, but we don't know how is that being processed, what are they adding into all of that. Yes.
And you hear about rice, artificial rice.
Yes.
I mean, you hear about all kinds of things. People outside are producing things scientifically, etc. We don't know the effect of those things on our bodies.
Yes.
And so in Africa, we've survived largely because we eat from our natural sources.
Yes.
And how do we maintain that?
Yes.
So that it's not corrupted.
Yes.
How do we maintain our own seeds?
Yes.
You know, those kinds of things are all some of the issues that are involved in food security. And the other big issue, which I would mention later, is the issue of land. You see? But fortunately, we have been having this intense discourse in Africa about food security. Because it's a major issue for us. It's a major issue for us, you know. And therefore, the leadership focus on enhancing the voices. You see, and this is one important thing about leadership, it's voice. You see? So we must enlarge the voices of those who are the key players, the key actors in the food sector.
Yes.
And that's why the leadership of women in food production and food security is in agriculture. Sometimes I don't like to use the word agriculture because it doesn't give the true picture. It's sort of like some big
broad
word.
sector,
Yes, that's right. Yes,
but food, we can all relate to food.
Because we can relate to food. Yes, that's right. So
maybe can we circle back to what you said you'd come back to later, but I think I can imagine is so crucial, is that to be able to have some level of decision-making power around food, ownership of land then becomes so key. So tell us, what is the situation in terms of, what are the current statistics telling us in terms of the percentage of women that actually own land in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa?
Well, so far the statistics are telling us that it's only 20%.
Ish.
Yes, exactly. Ish. You know?
And I can imagine if you're not owning the land, your decisions about how do I ensure we are either proper irrigation and proper whatever it
No,
is.
how do you ensure, first of all,
Yes.
where is the space where you're going to plant the food?
Yes.
Now, I traveled to one of the districts in Uganda not
Yes.
so long ago.
Yes.
And talking to the women, they said, we don't have food now. I said, why? They said, because our land has been bought over by some industrialists who are doing sugarcane.
Ah.
And so our husbands who control the land, that's the agnetic group. Our husbands who control the land want to make money, fast money. They think fast money. So they want the best part of the land to be put in sugarcane. Now, they will leave us the little bad parts on the sides, that, to use
Yes.
for growing food.
Yes.
And that does not produce enough food. Other countries have noticed that by growing intensively these cash crops,
Yes.
which you don't eat every day,
Yes.
you don't put on the table,
Yes.
they have food insecurity in their areas. So the impact of this 20%, we have to look at this food security is not just having land, but what kind of land? Where is the land?
Of course.
You want to give women the land way back up in some bush, where, it's another challenge to get there.
Yes.
It's just all these issues. So we have to look at this land question very seriously.
I hadn't thought of all those dimensions about where the land is, the quality of the land, the decision making, so that
Yes.
if you are going to do more high-level commercial farming,
Yes.
such as the sugarcane, how you're balancing that with food production. So my question would then be, what type of leadership strategies are needed to increase the voice and decision-making power of women throughout? And I think that's something I'm picking up from what you're saying. If we're talking about food, you said it's not just the women who are farming, but it's the whole, what do you call it? The food chain.
Supply chain,
The food
yeah.
supply chain, right down to the market women who we are buying from.
From the farm to your table.
Yes.
That's how you have to think about it.
From the farm to
To your
the table.
table.
Huh?
Yeah.
So what type of leadership is needed at different levels to increase women's leadership and voice and agency from farm to
To
table?
the table. One of the things that we have known all along in the women's movement is that nothing comes easy. Nobody gives you anything.
Okay.
Nobody gives you power. Nobody gives you voice. Nobody gives you land. you have to struggle
Yes.
for everything.
Yes.
And that's why this thing you're talking about of women working together at different levels.
Yes.
Those in high positions where they can make policies.
Yes.
Those who are researchers, technical people, and especially the women's rights activists. This is an important group because they are the main champions for the various rights of women.
Yes.
So one of the key strategies has been to form organizations that are really working for women's rights, especially land rights. They focus on land rights. Other people are looking at other types of rights,
Sure.
but these people are championing land rights. And I know Action Aid supported a group of women farmers
Yes.
in Africa
Yes.
who climbed Kilimanjaro.
Oh, wow.
They climbed Kilimanjaro to bring visibility
I love this.
to the issue of land rights.
I love this.
And they have their song about that, you know.
What I love about that is bringing visibility to it. Again,
Yes.
some of us may be in so many different sectors,
Yes.
completely unaware of the importance of this to our lives.
Yes.
We might be in insurance, we
Yes.
might be in banking, we
Right.
may be
Right.
whatever, we're economists,
Yeah.
we're teaching,
Yes.
we're in the medical sector,
Yeah.
not realizing that we care about the food
Yeah.
that we eat
Yeah.
increasingly, but now knowing and seeing the connection between the quality of food that we eat, but actually the leadership and enjoyment of specific rights by women, and a real focus around land rights. And you've talked about the power of women's leadership in that respect, and those women's rights organizations.
Yes.
What about our African governments? If I'm not mistaken, there is the Malabo Declaration of 2014, which commits African governments to gender equality in agriculture. Many people these days are like, oh, our governments, oh my gosh, talk. Do we actually see action? So to share a little bit with us, have you seen any tangible progress on the Malabo Declaration?
Well, given the number of years I have worked in development, one thing I have come to realize, change doesn't come overnight.
Yeah.
It takes time.
Yeah.
First of all, just changing the mindsets of people.
Yeah.
And then you're talking about governments. Those are juggernauts.
Yes.
To try to turn them around is very difficult. They have to go through processes.
Yes. Yes.
And they have to go through what we call the long march through the institutions. What do you do with those technical groups who are largely men, who will say, no, this can't be done, etc., and all of that. So, but I must say, working in a GMAC, I have to say, there's nothing we have asked our governments for that they have said no to. Our heads of states have never said no to us for anything we asked for. I just find that really interesting. And so in the AU, where the governments sit together, they have made these policy declarations.
Yes, commitments and declarations.
Yes, that's right. And they have formed the CADAP.
Yes.
The
CADAP.
Which is the Common African Agricultural Development Program.
Okay.
Yes, that's right. So the thing is now the implementation, the accountability framework.
That is it.
And that's what CADAP 3 is working on right now as we speak in South Africa. And women farmers are there. They are there to make sure their voices are heard, because we've been pushing this thing about the voices of women farmers. So now they have to get up and go. We can be here. We can talk. They have that empowerment to go there and talk about what they think should be done
and hold these governments accountable,
yes,
on implementing their commitments.
Yes.
So they've said yes at the AU.
Yes.
And now it's like at national level.
At national level.
How are you actually putting into practice what
Yes.
you've committed to at the continental
Precisely.
level?
Okay. You have to report on what you're doing.
Okay.
And the women are watching, and they're making their own reports.
Yes.
To say, yeah, but you still haven't done this or you still haven't done that. So yes, there is progress in terms of how we are thinking, how we are doing things. You can't see it in terms of saying, yes, now, women are getting certain, but some governments are saying that women should get certain percent of the land.
Nice.
Yes. And women are now more aware of their right to land. So, and some of them are buying their own land.
Exactly.
They're buying their own land. They're forming cooperatives to buy land. They're going to local authorities and says, oh, you have all this land here. Can we use it for farming? And many times the local authorities say, yes. We can let you have access to that. So there's some change.
Nice.
There is some change. Change is happening.
Nice.
Change is happening.
And what I like about what you've described about change happening is you've described how change is happening through women's leadership and activism.
Yes.
So it's not women sitting down and saying, oh, woe betide us, we're victims, but it's women at all levels,
Yes.
again, working
Yes.
together, again, destroying the myth that women are their worst enemies.
Yes,
Actually,
exactly.
This is an example of women leaders at different levels coming together to bring about change.
Yeah, that's right.
Powerful.
Yeah.
So I would love to continue on this one because it's an interesting one, but I'm hoping for those of you who haven't been as familiar with this sector around agriculture, food security, this is a new language. I hope you will never look at your food again the same way. I know not all of you may go to the market Taaka Awori and more. But I know you all of us sitting on this continent, we see that woman who's selling those mangoes. We see her who's selling the pineapples, the different food key things, the yam, whatever it is. We will never look at her again the same, not recognizing the quality of what she sells, the quality of what we eat is determined by her leadership, all the way, as we learned, from farm to table.
Yeah.
And we've learned about how women's leadership, but also the leadership of our governments and all of us working in different sectors, can affect that so that we all benefit in the end.
And one thing I want you to say is that when you encounter a woman in the market or on the street selling something, I beg you, please don't bargain with her. When you go to the supermarket, you don't bargain.
Isn't so true?
You just pay what you are told to pay. You are bargaining with somebody who has to feed her children, send them to school, pay health bills. Think about that when you're buying something from this woman.
Powerful. I've heard, I hope you've heard, we like to be bargaining. They start saying, it's 20 for this one. Then we're like, please 10. I think the message is clear. We don't bargain when we're going to get why should we bargain at this thing? She deserves that amount she gets. So thank you for reminding us of that. So our beloved listeners, those who are watching us, I want us to switch tack to the last part of this conversation, which, as I mentioned at the beginning, Dr. Awori is not clearly, as you've heard from her, one of those leaders that really reminds us that there is a different leadership on the continent, but she's also my mother. And so we want to end this conversation by just a little bit around, as I said, she's inspired my kind of leadership, but really about this mother-daughter dance. But maybe I'll start with her in particular and really ask her, because you've talked so much about women's leadership, and you could just hear from the way she talks about being a woman, how has your idea of what it means to be a woman evolved over time?
Well, I know sometimes when we are doing training in gender education, we ask women, when did you realize that you were a girl as opposed to being a boy? And I don't think that I had any episodes of those kinds of realizations. I knew I was always a girl. That was not a big problem with me. And in my growing up, I'd never grew up with women who were not leaders. You see that? I mean, that was the environment I grew up in. My aunt, my father's sister, who never went to school for a day, and who, even Christianity, she would not touch too much. When people were going to church, she would sit outside the church door and listen, but she wouldn't go inside the church. And she was a Zo.
Okay, and what is
a Zo? And a Zo is a woman leader in Liberia. She is the one who, she controls knowledge. She controls relationships. She knows what's going on. People come to her for decisions. She's a healer. She does so many things like that. She's a leader. And so that I used to follow her around everywhere she went. My mother was a leader. She was a leader in the women's movement. She introduced me to women's activism and leadership. Liberia is a very interesting country because it's a country where women are known to be strong and to be leaders. In Liberia, you have churches that are run just by women. Even if they have husbands, their husbands are, they're there in attendance, but they don't have a role. And we used to go to those churches with my mother. The women would do the preaching, and they still exist. We call them praying mothers. So my growing up environment was all about leadership. And my mother always insisted, why are the boys doing better than you? You people, come on, you got to have a play. She would make us organize plays. We had to recite poems. She was a broadcaster. So we had to go with her to the radio station and be her backup group. to sing and read the lesson, read whatever she was doing. So I've always voice, and I used to do drama when I was in school. So voice, leadership, not having the fear to project and articulate was my growing up environment. So my idea of leadership or for being a woman was never ensconced in limitations.
One more time, you have to repeat that one again, because I think that's the core.
Yeah.
Your idea of what it means
Yes.
to be a woman
Yes.
was never ensconced, was never
Wrapped
up
Yes.
in limitations
Limitations.
or being less than.
Yes.
And but we have to name that that's not the norm. And that's, I think, why I asked you the question.
Yeah.
Because implicit in this whole conversation we're having around women and food and women's leadership, you can already see that clearly a key principle just running through that is women are natural. Women have a right to be leaders.
Yes.
Women are natural leaders.
Yes.
And women are leaders. Huh?
Women are leaders in their homes.
Yes.
You know, even though there's somebody who is calling himself a leader,
Yes.
you are really the one leading.
Yeah.
You know, and they know it.
Yes.
They know it. It's just that, well, you know, they want to also be
Yes.
part of the, and some of them are really very good, you have to admit, you know, they're good partners.
Yes.
But this is the thing to remember. It's a partnership.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
it's a partnership. Yeah.
So
So my ideas of being a woman is
it's not about limitations.
It's not about limitations.
And
no.
it didn't start. What I love about what you're saying, because that even helps me understand myself better, and I'm sure it helps others understand me better. But what clear, as you said, it started from my great grand aunt, because I would have been your aunt.
Yeah.
Yeah. My grandmother.
Yes.
The generational dimension of it. That how when you start to see role models of women as leaders, right from the top, your identity as a woman, the word woman and leader go together naturally, which is not the norm.
Yeah.
In many, we have to honor that for many women, they may not have been raised with that. Instead, being a woman came with lots of limitation. But maybe the insight, the learning is that if we want something different for my child, your granddaughter, our grandnieces, all those are coming before that. It starts with what are we learning in the home about women and leadership and what it means to be a woman. Which would then bring me to, so what is one lesson you tried to teach me about leadership or leading or being strong? And I want to see if I got it or not.
I'm not sure if I deliberately thought I would teach you this lesson, but what I thought it was important for you to know and for all the children to know, you can be a leader anywhere.
Yes.
You know, you don't have to have nobody has to call you president or senator or whatever. You're a leader where you are because of what you're doing.
I love that.
I remember when you were very small.
Don't come out all my stories now.
You were 4 or 5 years old.
Okay.
And I don't know what experience you had. You came to me and says, "Do I have disciples?" And I wondered, who had been talking about disciples to you? Maybe you had listened to some TV program about Jesus and his disciples.
Yes.
And I said, but you have lots of followers. And one day you'll have lots of followers. Those are disciples.
So trust me, I have no disciples. These are just people who hopefully we've influenced a little bit.
Yeah, so leadership is not about a position. You can be a leader wherever you are. It's your commitment and your passion for what you are doing.
Yeah.
That brings you success and makes your work stand out. And others will see it and want to emulate it, you know.
Then I got the message.
I
got the message
it very well.
Because if you see at the training we do at Busara, you will know that in all our training programs, the very first session that we do around, we call it redefining leadership. Because too many people think about leadership as a title. And in that session, that is our key message. We start to say, leadership is not about a title. It's about influencing others to a
Yeah.
shared goal.
Yeah.
And you can do that regardless of whether you have the title.
Yeah.
So at least
Exactly.
I learned that
Oh,
lesson.
you did. You got
Okay.
100%.
Ah, yes, tick, 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 stars. Maybe my last question is, what have you learned about leadership by watching me?
Oh, my goodness, so much. Taaka, you are so brilliant. Yes.
Thank you.
I mean, there is just so much. I watch you, I listen to you talk, I ask you questions, and you have the answers. You know, you might think a little bit, but you have the answers. The big thing you're always talking about is the inner work.
Yes.
You have to do the inner work. People have to do the inner work, you know. If the inside is not right, it doesn't come out right on the outside,
Yes.
you know.
Yes.
Positivity. Oh, you're such a positive person. No, what was that story? Oh, no, I don't want to hear, mommy. You know, I don't want negative things. So, you know, yeah, that's right. You know, discipline. To be a leader, you need to be disciplined.
Yes.
And you have a lot of discipline. I'm afraid I'm not as good as that. And because you are disciplined, you do planning.
Yes.
You plan down to the last detail.
Yes.
I remember when you were getting married, we asked your husband if you could cope with your to-do list.
My endless to-do list.
Yes, that's right.
Which I have an app for now. It's called Todoist.
Yeah. And the other thing is, you work hard, and I work hard. I think you got that from me.
Yes.
But you also play hard. Now, I work hard, but I never learned how to play hard. I don't know how to play hard. I don't allow myself the luxury of playing hard, or even playing for that matter.
Yes.
And the other thing is being organized. You're a very organized person. I'm a very things happen by chance, you know. They fall into place by chance. But those are some of the things that I have really learned from you. Yeah, I know you.
But folks who also know me will also know Dr. Thelma will just be like, this one you've picked from your mother. And you can see particularly as I listen to you, and my whole ethos and ideology around leadership is picked, and I thank you for having that. I thank Grandma for having that. I thank great grand aunt for having that, because I can see that it's not me alone. I have been blessed to have those who have come before me who have taught me how to show up in leadership and an ethos around leadership.
And I think that when you're a leader, try to have an ideological paradigm
That was going to be
out of which you operate.
Yes. Explain what that means as your final advice or takeaway to those leading and who want to become better as leaders.
Well, you see, my ideological paradigm has to do with social justice. You know, that social justice, if you want peace, if you want development, you have to have social justice. It's at the bottom of everything. And social justice has to do with how you treat people.
Yeah.
How people, you know, how people see, how you see people, how people see themselves.
Yeah.
You bring more equality, you know, into things. And it's not about you, it's about them. It's about the people. So if you get into leadership and you're only thinking of you,
Yourself.
then you've lost the game already.
So be clear on what is that ideological paradigm.
Precisely.
What is that purpose of your leadership that's beyond you, regardless of what sector you're in. So that it's, your leadership is never, ever just about
you. That's
Wonderful.
right. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thelma Awori, aka Mommy, for joining me on this episode. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation, and I hope you all have too, our dear listeners and those who are watching us. And please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future shows. Thank you for joining us. See you for the next episode.
And thank you for having me.
Thank you.
I enjoyed it also. Yes, that's right.
Bye. See you next time. Bye. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Leadership in Africa Redefined, the podcast. I hope you learned a lot. And if you found value in this conversation, share it with a friend and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you would like further support on your leadership journey, please get in touch. You can find us on busara-africa.com. And don't forget to follow Busara Africa on all social media platforms.